The Black Hawk set us down 40 minutes before sunrise, its rotors beating the humid air into a frenzy before lifting back into the bruised, pre-dawn sky. This was it, the final contract. 6 figures for a babysitting job on a private island, then Montana was a reality. A quiet piece of land where the only incoming I'd ever have to worry was the mailman. I ran a final check on my rifle's optic, the familiar way to comfort. Below us, the helipad was a concrete scar on a cliff overlooking a churning gray sea. "All right, let's move," I said into my throat mic. "Riley, you're on point. Holt, you got rear, standard wedge formation. Exfil is on my command. Same LZ." "Copy, Hayden." Marcus Riley's voice crackled back, his tone light. He was our tech guy, wiry and sharp, and he thought this was a paid vacation. Isaac Holt just gave a clipped, "Roger." That was Isaac, a mountain of a man who spoke only when necessary. The briefing from Ares Strategic was sparse. Go to Isla Perdida, find the Aegis Biogenetics facility, retrieve its founder, Dr. Gatlin Hall, a disgraced genius who'd gone off-grid, non-hostile target. Simple. The silence was the first thing that felt wrong. The jungle that pressed in on all sides of the facility's perimeter fence was so dense it seemed to swallow sound. It was a dead quiet, broken only by the drip of moisture from oversized leaves and something else. A high-pitched, wet, guttural click that echoed from the canopy. It wasn't a bird or a monkey. I filed it away. Unknown local fauna. The facility itself was a contradiction. Clean, state-of-the-art lines buried under a decade of neglect. Thick green vines like pythons constricted concrete walls. A pane of reinforced glass in the main entrance was shattered. A spider web of cracks radiating from a single point of impact. The primary power was dead. Only thin lines of emergency lighting cast a sickly yellow glow down the main corridor. The air was thick with the smell of mold, ozone from failing circuits, and a faint musky scent I couldn't place, like a zoo's reptile house left to fester. "Place looks abandoned," Marcus muttered, his light sweeping over a reception desk covered in damp, curling papers. "Let's get some eyes," I ordered. "Find a security hub." We found one 3 doors down. Marcus set his pack down and went to work on the primary console while Isaac stood watch at the door. I did a quick sweep of the office. That's when I saw the stains on the sterile white floor. A dark, rust-colored splatter near a toppled chair, and what looked like drag marks leading toward the hallway. I knelt, touching the edge of the stain. Dry. Old. My gut tightened. This wasn't in the briefing. "Hayden, I'm getting something," Marcus said. "Most of the internal cams are fried, but there. Feed from Biodome 7 is trying to connect." The main monitor flickered to life, displaying a grainy black and white image. It showed a vast cavernous space filled with unnaturally large trees, steel girders crisscrossing high up in the darkness like a metal spider web. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "Part of his private ecosystem, I guess," Marcus said, typing fast. "Trying to clear it up." "There!" Isaac's voice was a low growl. He was pointing at the screen. "Top right." I squinted. For a second there was nothing but static and shadow. Then I saw it. A shape clinging to one of the highest girders. It was dark, vaguely human-shaped, but its limbs were too long, its movement too fluid. It scurried along the beam with impossible speed, not like a man or an ape, but like an insect. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Before I could ask Isaac what the hell we were looking at, the monitor gave a high-pitched whine. The screen flashed white, and then the entire room plunged into darkness. The emergency lights were gone, All power was gone. For a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of our own breathing, magnified in the oppressive blackness. The professional calm I'd built over 17 years in the field was starting to crack. The flicker of unease I'd felt in the jungle had hardened into a cold certainty. We weren't alone. Then came the new sound, faint but clear. A dry, dragging noise coming from just above our heads, from inside the walls. We froze, weapons tight against our shoulders. My helmet lamp carved a narrow, dust-filled cone through the black, lighting up a patch of sterile white wall. Isaac's beam swept left, Marcus's swept right. The soundproofing here was military-grade. Whatever made that noise inside the walls was heavy. That dragging sound was slow, methodical, like something heavy scraping across a hollow space. Thermal? Isaac's voice rumbled low in my ear, steady as always. Negative, Marcus answered, his own voice a pitch too high, too strained. I'm getting zip. Walls feel like lead. Whatever it is, it's hidden. The scraping stopped. The silence that rushed in was somehow worse. It felt heavy, like the moment before you open a booby-trapped door. Procedure said hold position, contain the threat. But our objective, Dr. Hall, was deeper in this tomb. Our clock was ticking. We move, I said, my voice flatter than I meant it. Standard file, 5 meters apart. Isaac on point. I'll take rear. Stay off the walls. We left the dead security screens behind, boots whispering rhythmically on the tiles. Every hall breathed a new kind of darkness, the air thick with the smell of damp rot and burning wires. Every corner was a death trap. My training kicked in, eyes scanning intersections, ceiling vents, the deep shadows our lights couldn't cut. About 50 meters down the main hall, Isaac raised a closed fist. He swung his rifle beam onto a heavy steel door marked ST-03, a service stairwell. 3 deep gashes running straight and parallel were clawed into the metal, fresh gouges. Bright, raw steel glinted under the white paint. The strength it took. I ran a gloved finger over the edge of one, sharp as a scalpel, 3 prongs, like some demon's pitchfork. Hayden, Marcus whispered over the radio. You picking anything up? Negative, I replied, still staring at the door. Hearing what? Not sure. Faint, like whispers buried in the static. It's interference from the dying power grid, Riley. Focus. Dismissing him felt easy, but a cold little knot clenched in my gut. We bypassed the scarred stairwell. Priority was Hall. His last ping was Sector Gamma, the main genetics wing. The next sign of them came in what looked like a project manager's suite. Door cracked open. Inside, the place was torn apart, but not random wrecking. It was a nest. Right in the middle, junk was piled almost waist-high. Shredded lab coats, chair stuffing ripped out, stacks of papers torn into fine strips. All tangled together with a spider web of Cat5 cables and wiring ripped straight from the walls, and woven into the top, clear in my helmet light. Long, dark hair, human hair. It was a den, built by a predator from the bones of its victim's world. Isaac spat a low curse. I didn't say a word, just backed us out slow and gently closed the door. 10 minutes from Sector Gamma, we hit a big, round junction where several halls met. Marcus worked a keypad, trying to override the lock sealing the main blast door to the labs. Isaac and I covered him, rifles pointed into the dark tunnels branching off. Almost there, Marcus muttered. Just a few more... Wait. His voice went hushed. Hear that? Hear what, Marcus? I asked, patience thinning. Someone's crying, he said, sounding confused. He took a step away from the console, tilting his head. Like a woman? I heard only the low groan of emergency power. Riley, get that door open. It's bad acoustics. Faulty wiring, maybe. No, man, I hear it plain as day now, he insisted, his light beam swinging down a totally dark side hall to our left. She's saying, help me. He was a solid soldier, but he had a heart. That sound, real or fake, dug at that. Marcus, that's an order, back on the console. He paused. The crying ghost must have sounded heartbreakingly real. I'll just see. 50 feet. Sounds close. Before I could grab him, he slipped away, rifle ready, easing into the black passage. Marcus, goddammit, get back here! His voice crackled over the radio, tight. See something. Wait, nothing here. Just a closet. I don't get it. Then, a sharp intake of breath. Not fear, shock, utter shock, followed by a heavy, thick thump, too solid for a punch. Then another sound, a ripping, tearing sound my brain refused to accept. Marcus? I snapped into the mic. Riley, report, status. The only reply was a final, soft click. As his line went dead, silence slammed down. Utter, total, complete. Isaac slowly turned to me, his helmet lamp cutting hard lines on his jaw. This mission wasn't a paycheck anymore. It wasn't extraction. The babysitting job was over. This was a hunt now, and we were suddenly the prey. For a long moment, nobody moved. The dead air in the corridor was heavier than water, pressing in on us. My training screamed a dozen different commands at once. Fall back, set a perimeter, attempt to re-establish contact. But all of it felt like trying to use a city map in the middle of the ocean. The rules didn't apply here. Hayden. Isaac's voice was low, a rumbling question from the mountain beside me. He wasn't asking what we did next. He was asking if I was still in command of myself. I took a deep breath, letting the cold burn of recycled air settle me. Forward, I said, the word tasting like ash. The objective hasn't changed. We get the package. We moved. Our smooth, silent teamwork from an hour ago was gone, replaced by a tense, twitching paranoia. We advanced with our backs almost touching, rifle muzzles carving overlapping paths through the crushing darkness ahead. Every scrape of our boots on the tile sounded like a gunshot in the silence. The sound wasn't trapped in the walls anymore. It was everywhere now, a living silence that seemed to be listening. I hated it more than any firefight. We found the main genetics lab at the end of the central corridor, Sector Gamma. The blueprints showed a large circular chamber. The door was thick, reinforced steel, but it was the changes that chilled my blood. It was barricaded from the inside. Thick metal shelves, heavy diagnostic machines, even office furniture, all piled against the door in a desperate, messy wall. He's in there, Isaac stated, his helmet light scanning the rough barricade. And he's scared. I pressed my comms button, keeping my voice low. Dr. Hall, this is Hayden Brennan with Ares Strategic. We're here to get you out. Open the door. Silence. Then a frantic shuffling from inside the room. A voice, thin and ragged, called back. How do I know you're real? They can talk. They can sound like anybody. The truth hit me like a punch in the stomach. Marcus hadn't heard radio noise. He'd heard a trap. My authentication is 0 Alpha 9, I said, reciting the code we'd been given. Your countersign is Kilo 6 Tango. Another long pause. We heard heavy metal grating against metal as something huge was pulled aside from the door. Several electronic locks clicked open, and the heavy door hissed open just enough for a single person to slide through. The man who stood before us looked like a ghost. Dr. Gatlin Hall was terrifyingly thin, his expensive suit hanging off him like a burial cloth. His hair was a wild gray tangle, and his eyes, God, his eyes were hollow pits showing no sleep and bottomless terror mixed with something else, a frantic pride. He waved us inside with quick, jerky movements, like a bird, then sealed the door behind us. The lab felt like a fortress built from despair. Expensive gene sequencing machines were jammed against windows looking out on the jungle, their screens blank. He led us to a small cleared area in the middle that he'd clearly been living in. They killed your other man, didn't they? Hall asked, not with sympathy, but like it was a scientific question. He didn't wait for an answer. They learn incredibly fast. It's their greatest ability. Human intelligence merged with the meanest hunting instincts. He started pacing wildly, waving his hands. Project Chimera, that's what the suits called it. The board, the investors, such a cold name. I called them my children, my prototypes. He spun to face me, a frightening grin splitting his thin face. Do you know what it's like to create something perfect, Sergeant? Something with the power of a grizzly bear, the nose of a wolf, the silent, deadly skill of a great horned owl. All of it. All of it driven by a human brain. No fear, no hesitation, pure killing focus. As he spoke, a huge shadow fell across the moonlight coming through one of the barricaded windows. It was big, hunched, and moved with an eerie, liquid smoothness that didn't match its size. It paused, its outline a terrifying shape against the glass, then slipped back into the dark. They're hunting now, Hall whispered, his voice dropping low. He watched the window, a flicker of that awful pride in his eyes. They don't just attack. They test you. They find the soft spots. They study your patterns, your blind spots. That's how they took Marcus. A simple sound bait. A voice he would trust. My stomach twisted. The image of Marcus, strong and capable, being tricked into an ambush by a ghostly voice. My hand wave earlier felt like a knife in the gut. Isaac shifted forward, his rifle held low but ready. What are they? He demanded, his voice a hard rumble. What did you build? Hall just laughed, a high, crazy sound bouncing off the clean lab walls. I built the next stage of evolution, a creature you can't trick, can't outfight, a creature that understands you, knows what you love, knows what you fear. And then, right from the crack under the heavy lab door, came a whisper, soft, perfectly clear, terrifyingly close. It wasn't a growl. It was a flawless human voice, a woman's voice. Isaac? It said, rich with a warmth totally out of place in this concrete grave. Isaac, honey, is that you? I snapped my head towards Isaac. All the color had vanished from his face. His knuckles turned white where he gripped his rifle. For the first time since I'd known him, the solid calm in his eyes was shattered, replaced by raw, horrifying dread. Every muscle locked tight, torn between years of trained reactions and a raw, deep terror trying to rip him in half. He didn't move. He barely breathed. The voice was a perfect copy of his mother's. He told me once, over whiskey in a dusty bar in Kandahar, that cancer took her when he was 17. A high-pitched metallic scream ripped through the lab, a sound of wrenching steel that shattered the psychological stillness. Isaac flinched as if struck. His head snapped toward the noise, the ghost of his mother's voice finally banished by the sudden violence. I followed his gaze. A ceiling-mounted ventilation grate made of thick, reinforced steel was buckling inwards, its bolts shrieking in their sockets. A dark, three-fingered claw punched through the twisted metal, then another, prying the opening wider. "They're in!" Hall shrieked, his voice thin with panic. "The ducts! They learned the duct system!" Something long and sinewy dropped from the mangled vent, landing with a thick, wet slap on the far side of the lab. It unfolded itself from the floor, a nightmarish silhouette made of limbs that were too long, joints that bent all wrong. More were coming. "Hayden, the sub-pen." Hall grabbed my arm, his eyes wild. "It's our only chance, my private dock, on the east cliff face." "What's the route?" I yelled, shoving him behind me and raising my rifle. Isaac mirrored the movement, his training finally overcoming the ghost in his ear. We formed a barrier between Hall and the approaching darkness. "Through the nursery," Hall stammered. "It's the most direct path. Sector 9, the biodome." Of course, the fastest out was right through their territory. I didn't waste time arguing. "Move, Isaac, take the rear." I shoved Hall through the lab's rear access door and we charged into a narrow service tunnel. The sputtering emergency lights threw long, leaping shadows, making every corner into a kill zone. Behind us, the crash of breaking glass echoed, followed by a wave of inhuman hisses strong enough to vibrate through the concrete floor. Isaac burst through the door a second later, slamming it shut. He didn't try to lock it. We both knew locks wouldn't stop them now. We ran. Our boots hammered a frantic rhythm on the metal grating. Hall, wheezing badly, pointed us down branching hallways and through heavy airlock doors he unlocked with a key card trembling in his hand. The atmosphere changed, thick, damp, and choking with the reek of wet earth and decay. "This way," he gasped, leading us to a heavy pressure door marked Biodome 7, Primary Habitat. The nursery. He spun the wheel to cycle the lock. When the door opened, we stepped into absolute nothingness. Complete dark. It felt like falling down a well. The sterile facility air vanished, replaced by a wall of wet jungle heat that made breathing hard. The stink was overpowering now. Soggy soil, rotting plants, and that rank animal stench the creatures carried multiplied 100 times. My helmet lamp cut a feeble, narrow tunnel through the dark, lighting up slabs of monstrous, overgrown plant life. Pale, mushroom-like trees stretched like bony arms toward an invisible ceiling, their branches choked with thick hanging vines. "Catwalks this way," Hall whispered, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. "Need to cross the dome, about 50 meters to the other side." We moved onto the narrow metal walkway. It felt fragile, a thin support hanging over bottomless shadow. Below us, only blackness. The only sounds were our gasping breaths and the constant drip, drip, drip of water falling from hidden leaves into hidden pools. I kept my rifle leveled forward. Isaac guarded our backs. Every rustle of leaves above, every groan of the metal under our boots sent another shot of adrenaline through me. They were here, packed in the shadows all around. I felt them like a pressure just outside the reach of my light. A white shape flickered in the canopy to my right, vanished the instant I turned. Then a sound from above. A soft, rhythmic clicking like claws ticking together. Contact. Dead ahead above us. Isaac's voice was low and rock-solid in my ear, the soldier taking charge again. I swept my light upwards, raking the steel supports. For a split second, I caught it. 2 shining animal eyes fixed on us before sliding back into the dark maze above. That was it. The signal. The attack slammed us from both sides. A creature dropped from the girders directly in front of us. It hit the catwalk 20 feet ahead. The impact jolted the whole walkway like a punch. It straightened up, a massive knot of muscle and tough hide blocking our path. At the same moment, a low, guttural snarl came from behind. I whirled. 2 more were skittering fast along the underside of the bridge, their long fingers and toes finding holds in the metal latticework, closing in on Isaac. We were trapped. A perfect pincer. The cold, tactical part of my brain, the part that had kept me breathing for over 19 years, locked down. No exit, choke point, death trap. Then Isaac moved. He shoved me and Hole forward with a violent heave that sent us stumbling. "Go!" he roared, pure command. "Get him out! That's your job!" He planted his feet and swung his light machine gun towards the things scrabbling under the catwalk. "Come on, you bastards!" he screamed into the smothering dark. I froze for half a heartbeat, torn between staying with my man and the cold final order he'd just given. "Isaac, go!" I grabbed Hall's collar and dragged him with me, breaking into a wild, pounding run away from my friend, away from Isaac. The catwalk bounced madly under our feet. Over my radio, chaos erupted. First came the deafening, furious roar of Isaac's squad automatic weapon, sharp bursts ripping into the black. Stopping them cold? It was answered by a furious chorus of high-pitched screams. Pain and animal rage mixed together. I heard Isaac shout again, one raw, defiant yell, pure soldier. The firing started again, sharp, choppy bursts now. Under the noise, the clinks of claws scrambling faster on metal grated behind me. Another shriek, then cut off with a wet crunch. Then one last sound, a single tearing human scream. Cut, dead. The roaring gun stopped. My radio filled with a new sound, low and wet, triumphant, a chorus of guttural clicking and chittering noises, things celebrating their kill. The comm clicked once, then fell silent. Dead silence. Forever. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound I'd ever heard. It pressed in, filling the void left by Isaac's rifle, by his final, ragged shout. Forever. The word echoed in my skull. I stood frozen on the catwalk, the humid air thick and still. Behind me, Dr. Hall made a soft, whimpering sound. The noise snapped me out of it. There was no time for grief. Grief was a luxury for a world that still made sense. I grabbed Hall's arm. He was limp, his eyes wide and vacant, staring back toward the jungle where Isaac had vanished. "Move. Now." My voice was a gravelly command, stripped of all emotion. I didn't have any left to give. I practically dragged him, his feet stumbling over the iron grating. He was the package, the only thing that gave Isaac's sacrifice any meaning. We stumbled out of the nursery's exit, crashing through a wall of broad, wet leaves and onto a muddy cliffside path. Below, the Pacific churned, smashing against black volcanic rock. And there it was. Maybe 100 yards away, carved into the cliff face, was the submarine pen. A single concrete platform, wet with sea spray, and a small, sleek submersible floating in its cocoon of dark water. 2 weak docking lights cut through the gloom, a pathetic, beautiful invitation to salvation. Hope was a dangerous thing, but I let myself feel it just for a second. I shoved Hall ahead of me. "Get to the hatch, get it open." He didn't respond, just stared at the sub as if he didn't understand what it was. I was halfway to him, my rifle scanning the tree line, when a shape detached itself from the deeper shadows near the cave entrance. It wasn't a rush. It was a deliberate, weighty emergence. It was massive, a nightmare of anatomy that my brain struggled to understand. It had the hulking frame of a grizzly bear, walking upright on 2 powerful, misshapen legs. Its skin was a patchwork of coarse black fur and pale, scarred flesh. One arm ended in a hand that was almost human, if grotesquely oversized. The other was longer, thinner, ending in 3 talons like an eagle's, each a foot of curved black claw. It stopped at the edge of the concrete platform, and the smell hit me. The same musky, cloying scent from the nest, but richer, stronger. It was the alpha. My rifle was up, sights steady on its chest. But it didn't look at me. Its eyes, unnervingly intelligent and glowing with a faint internal light, were fixed entirely on Dr. Hall. Slowly, deliberately, the creature raised its clawed hand. The movement was stiff, unnatural, a grotesque parody of a motion it had been taught but for which its body was not built. The talons scraped together as it brought the hand to its brow, holding the gesture for a full second. A salute. A choked sound escaped Hall's throat. A flicker of something crossed his face, something I will never forget. It was pride. A sick, fatherly pride. "My God," he whispered, his voice trembling with awe. "It's perfect." That single, abominable moment of connection was broken when the creature lowered its arm and its gaze shifted, locking onto me. It took a step, its massive form coiling to lunge. The perfect soldier had its new target. "No!" Hall screamed, the sound tearing from his throat. He stumbled forward, planting himself directly between me and the chimera. The creature halted instantly. It was not a hesitation born of surprise, but of obedience. Its head cocked, a gesture of profound confusion, its glowing eyes darting between me and its creator. It was waiting for an order. I didn't waste the opening. I lunged, not at the monster, but at the man. I slammed my shoulder into Hall's back, shoving him forward. He sprawled through the sub's open hatch with a cry. I scrambled in right after him, my hand already wrenching the heavy locking wheel. With a final desperate heave, I spun it tight. The hatch sealed with a solid, definitive clang and the hiss of equalizing pressure. I fell back against the bulkhead, my chest heaving, listening to the pumps engage as the sub began its descent. I crawled to the thick curved viewport. The Alpha was still on the platform. It knelt, and with an impossible gentleness it reached out and cradled Dr. Hall's head. Its creator wasn't dead, just knocked out from the fall. The creature wasn't enraged. It looked lost, sorrowful. It stared down at the man's face, its own monstrous features a mask of bewildered abandonment. Then its head snapped up. Its glowing eyes found the viewport of the descending sub, locking directly onto mine through the dark water. There was no animal rage in that gaze. There was something far, far worse. There was intelligence, memory, and a promise. It knew my face. The darkness of the deep Pacific swallowed the island, but it couldn't swallow that image. I was safe. And I was broken. That quiet plot of land in Montana felt like a dream from another man's life. I hadn't escaped. I had only run, and the ghosts of Isla Perdida were coming with me.